Welcome all to the inaugural and first ERT Conference. Those that haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name's Delander, and up until about an hour ago I didn't know I was the MC, so please certainly bear with me. Unfortunately, Kim Gray, which you'll see from the program, Senior Station Officer here, has been called away, and as we know, when you're dealing with emergency services, those things are going to happen from time to time. So if I look like I'm struggling a little bit, hopefully I'm a quick learner when it comes to emceeing. But welcome. Those that were here last night, I hope you're just a little bit blurry-eyed as I have. It was a fantastic welcome to the next 2 days, which is going to be fantastic. Before I introduce the brainchild and of course the inventor of this event, Ray Wallbank, I wanted to take an opportunity to just quickly run through the sponsors and the people that have supported the event, because without those people, these events are impossible to put on. And there are a couple, so we'll just run through them all. We've got our exhibitors and sponsors. We've got Furno here. We've got Chubb. We've got RWW. We've got Rescue Bandage, Scott Safety, Gas Tech Australia, McDermott's, Life Flight, PT Rescue, Red Energy Promotions, and Meandu Mine. So on behalf of everyone, thank you very much for those suppliers, those sponsors, because without your support, none of us are here today. So. If you have your program in front of you there, as I said, there are one or two minor changes. Unfortunately, our Dr. Simon Jensen, a critical burns specialist, won't be able to make it today due to a situation in the hospital in Brisbane. So there's one change there that we've brought in, and Furno will be running through their new ambulance. So that'll be really good to get an opportunity to have a look at. Probably brings me to mobile phones. No. I'd just like to hand over now to the brainchilds of the event, Ray Wallbank.
Yeah, thanks for that, Al. Guys, after training in this industry for a little while, having on-road experience like a lot of guys in this room have, we sort of noticed a few discrepancies in the way people are training, what's being said out there, and we've got to make a change. That was the whole idea of this conference. We've got to start getting the right word out. I did come up with this brainchild, and then I handed it to my wife. Simple. She's done all the hard work. So I come up with the idea. Myself, Dennis, Ray, Al, which are some of my staff members, said this is what we've got to do. So that's why we've tried to get the best possible speakers we can get, and then start to make that difference. And guys, this is up to you. After this couple of days, take this back to your sites and start to put that knowledge into your ERT crews. That's the whole idea of this. Okay, so welcome. Hope you all have a great day, 2 days. Hope you do take something away from this, and let's start to make a change and make our sites a better place. Thanks, guys, and I'll hand you back to Al Baxter now. Thank you very much.
Just to support Ray's comments, is that this is about you guys. It's about getting in and learning new techniques and making sure that you build new networks, new friendships, and learning. The one constant thing about rescue, as we all know, is that there's no textbook way of doing something. You know, we can all go to the same scenario, and each of us will probably do it a different way and get the right objective, as long as we do it safely. There's always a number of different ways we can do it, and you'll always see a different way, and what I like to say is you add it up there to your mental toolbox, and the more different ways you see different things done, expands that toolbox for every different scenario you go to, and that's really important. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about rescue, is you never stop learning, and new techniques come out all the time. And it doesn't matter whether you've been in the job 2 months or whether you've been in the job 20 years. You never stop learning, and that's fantastic that everybody's here today, because it's a real indication that you guys are like-minded, and you're here to continue to grow and expand that mental toolbox. So, without any further ado, we'll get into our first guest speaker, and we have some fantastic guest speakers over the next 2 days, and real experts in their chosen fields. And some have come as far as overseas and internationally to speak to you guys over the next couple of days. In particular, our first speakers come from Sydney, and that's Simon Delander. Simon Delander is the General Manager, HSE Risk, Manager of the Evolution Mining. He's responsible for emergency management, safety, risk. He holds tertiary qualifications in emergency management from Charles Sturt University, has over 24 years experience in emergency management, New South Wales and Victoria fire agencies, and over 15 years experience in mines rescue and industry emergency response. Simon has been deployed in leadership roles to incidents both in Australia and overseas. He's been fortunate enough to work with mines rescue teams in Canada, US, Indonesia, Laos, Brazil and Mexico. He's heavily involved in the mines rescue competitions and is currently the head adjudicator of the Minerals Council Victorian Mines Rescue Competition. Simon has been awarded the National Fire Service Medal and the National Emergency Services Medal. So please join with me in welcoming Simon to the stand.
To move that down a bit, I'm a bit short. Morning everyone, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. Can you hear me okay? You're on? Al's just going to fire me up. So I've got a couple of slides I want to share with you. So for my topic today, I'm going to talk about risk management. So I'm not going to tell you how to do a JSA or do a risk assessment, don't be alarmed. What I want to do is share some ideas with you and share some information about mine rescue events I've been involved in, and also ask you some questions. You don't have to answer them unless you want to, but it's more so to stimulate a bit of thought for when you go back and think about your emergency response plans back at site. And as always, technology is messing with us, but we're looking pretty close now. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the legal obligation. So I'll start talking about that, and we'll see how well I remember the slides. So one of the things we've got to do in Queensland. So I'm going to talk a bit about Queensland. Anyone working in New South Wales, just out of interest? There's a couple. Yep, Richard, only a couple. So I'll talk about New South Wales as well. But my take was this is predominantly a Queensland exercise. So in Queensland, there's a requirement for us all to provide for emergencies. So that's not like a factory where you've got to have an emergency plan that's up on the wall. You're expected to do a risk assessment, understand all the different things that can go wrong on your site. And thank you, Al. And what you'll do then is you'll have to do a risk assessment. And that risk assessment will understand is what's the actual likelihood of that happening. And if it was to happen, how do you deal with it? And it's not just a matter of calling 000. So if you work in a factory, you can do that. But if you're on a mine site, there's no one to call. Normally it's the ERT team. Maybe you can call the mine up the road. So you've got to have a whole plan of how you're going to manage said incident, what facilities you're going to have on site, what resources you're going to have on site, and equally how that's all going to happen. So we're in a bit of a unique situation there. There's other industries that do similar things like oil and gas, but mining, really, who do you call when you need help? You call yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So here's a little safety share to start off with. So anyone familiar with the Mount Lyell fire in 1912? So this is a few years ago now, well before most of our time. But I wanted to share this one. 42 miners died at this incident. It was a fire underground, so it's a metalliferous mine, not a coal mine. And this was one of the most early examples I could find when I was doing my studies in emergency management of mutual aid. So this happened in Tasmania, and they didn't have breathing apparatus in Tasmania, so they actually shipped it across from Victoria along with a mine rescue team. You sort of think about that. You've got a mine on fire, you're having to get gear from another state across water, so did a boat trip, about 13-hour boat trip, which was pretty quick in those days, and then on a very, very fast steam train, as I understand, to get all that gear down to site. One of the things that got my interest, where I wanted to share with you, because we're going to talk a little bit about risk management, is there was no emergency warning system in the mine at the time. So there was a fire, and this is quite a large mine, so you do a bit of research on it if you're interested. And what happened was the shift bosses and some of the other guys that actually had vehicles had to run around to all the different parts of the mine saying, there's a fire, you've got to get out. Can you sort of imagine that? So that's the only way to get the word out that something's gone wrong. So 42 42 miners didn't make it, and a lot of firefighters went down to try and put this fire out. So if you look it up, it's probably worth having a bit of a look at. What it was all the wood that's used to prop up the mine caught on fire. So the fire started in the pump house, and then you've basically got the shaft fire, and those are pretty common years ago. Fortunately, we don't use a lot of wood in the mines anymore. Next one, Al. So Al mentioned I work for Evolution. There's quite a few Evolution mining people here, which is fabulous. I thought I should just talk about Evolution for 30 seconds. So about 10% of our workforce are ERT trained, which we're really proud of. I'd like that number to be higher, but 10% is pretty impressive. About 70% of our workforce have been trained in CPR. So last time I shared that on LinkedIn, I got challenged by a bunch of people saying that's not enough, and it probably isn't, so it probably should be everyone. So that's a bit of a target for us. In terms of activation, so our guys are pretty busy, but we're not going to many mine rescue incidents. So we did 40 community response incidents last year. So they varied from everything from a bushfire at Krakow to running the ambulance at Westonia in WA to helping someone that fell off a horse at Mount Carlton. So our guys are being utilised in the community, and I think that's really, really important. Why it's important is because if you look at the safety standards in mines now, there aren't a lot of major incidents anymore. So how do we keep our skills competent? How do we keep our ERT teams operationally ready to roll? Community incidents is probably a good way to do it. And also, at the same time, we can help out our neighbours. So if we happen to be if we're probably the first people to call if something goes wrong, good chance our neighbours are going to want to call 000 and expect an ambulance to turn up, but we could be the closest ambulance, so why wouldn't we help? Keeps our skills going. So here we go, risk management. Thank you, Al. So legal obligations, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about what could go wrong. I wanted to sort of challenge your thinking there a little bit. I've got a couple of case studies I want to share with you, and happy to answer questions on them. We'll talk a little bit about site emergency management protocols, and then support and resources that are available to you as emergency professionals. Next one now. So how did I go trying to summarise this? Not bad. So we've got to identify our potential emergency situations. We've got to provide the resources, facilities and equipment. And this next one's important. So when you look at the legislation, you might read that and think, and Lionel's here from the Mines Department, so he might jump in on this later or now if he chooses. It's not just about training up your ERT teams. It's about training everyone. All good? It's about training everyone to be able to do their piece of the emergency response. So, thank you. Do you want to talk about that one? Is that any better? Much better. So what do we mean by that? So you've got an emergency management plan. We'll all have an emergency management plan at site. Has everyone been trained in it? Does everyone know their piece they've got to do in the emergency plan? It's not just about whether I can put a self-rescuer on. It's how do I raise the alarm? What information do I give? What can I do to help until the ERT team arrive? Because in most cases, ERT teams are going to take about an hour to mobilise. So you might be able to do it a little bit quicker, but that's about the average. So by the time the word goes out, you assemble, you get brief, you get your gear, you deploy, it's about an hour. And that's a long, long time. So what is your site frontline guys able to do? They can do CPR, can they do some trauma management, can they stabilise the scene, can they secure the scene until you guys arrive? What does that look like? I'll go back one now. So this is an important one, liaising with outside services and agencies. So it's actually required under the Queensland legislation. So it's not a matter of saying, oh yeah, the nearest fire truck is 100 kilometres down the road. You have to talk to them. You have to understand what their capabilities are, you have to understand what they can do to help you and what you can do to help them. So why I wanted to really point this one out is, just for a show of hands, how many people have had their local fire agency, SES, out to site? Have a look around, a couple? What about the police? Yeah, couple? Ambos? Excellent. So why is this important? So if you have a major incident on site, the police are going to turn up. The police are going to want to take a fairly significant leadership role. So it'd be good for them to have an understanding of what you guys are about, how your emergency plan works, and what role you'd like them to fulfil. How can they help? Because ultimately we have to work with everyone else when there's a major incident. So it's gone are the days where you will run this yourself. There'll be other agencies that will want to help, and there'll be other agencies that will require their involvement in some way or form. So that's a really important one. So reach out to them. There's different ways to do it. There's emergency management officers in each council area, and there's these things called the disaster management committees or local emergency management committees where you can actually talk to all these people at the same time, share a little bit of information. You'll find they're pretty receptive to learning about what goes on. Next one, mate. So what can go wrong? So I think we all know the principal mining hazards, fire, explosion, rock falls, chemicals, falls, etc. What I wanted to really talk a little bit around is a question for yourself to ask when you go back to site. Do your emergency plans cover environmental incidents? Tailings dam failure, as an example. Significant chemical spill, contamination of waterways. Could they be an emergency? They could be a crisis for a company. They could actually be a company ender. So that's something we should really have covered in our emergency plan. Now that's not saying the ERT team are the only people that are involved in that, but you'd probably find you're the first one to call. If I think about a fairly large oil spill we had on one of our sites years ago, the first people called were the ERT team. So they had to go and deal with that as an environmental incident. So they were straight into it, and that was potentially quite significant. So what do your plans say about that? How do you get involved? Remote and isolated workers. So you've probably seen the news over the last few years that's becoming more and more of a focus area. So when we've got exploration people out running around their own, or we've got geologists out looking for that next payload of ore, they might be working alone, there might be two of them. How are we looking after them, and what role does the emergency response team play if they don't check in? How do we make sure that they're looked after and we know where they are? A couple of other ones over here just to, again, I'm interested in where you guys sit on this. Product stewardship. So what do I mean by that? So we all make a product and we sell it to market. I'm going to talk in my case studies about a product issue that a company I work for and we had to deal with. But I'm talking about you made a mineral concentrate and it's spilt up the Bruce Highway. Is that your issue, or is that someone else's issue? Probably find it's whoever owns the concentrate's issue, even if you've already sold it. So there's a reputational issue there, and could it be possible that your ERT team's called in to assist? Absolutely. What about human and community health? So an example, probably about 10 years ago I was working for a company that ran a very large mining operation in Queensland. We had 2 people come up with H1N1 on a mining camp. So they had to be isolated, they had to be quarantined for 7 days, blood taken, sent to Queensland Health. How do we keep them safe, and how do we keep everyone else safe? So is that in your emergency plan? So it's not just about things going wrong in the mine, it's things could go wrong in the camp. Community health. Could your operations affect the outside community you're working within? Again, I can think of a time where there was a SO2 emitting from a port facility in Queensland affecting young kids at local school. Can ERT get involved with that? Absolutely. Guess what you'll be doing? Monitoring gas, setting up tarps to take action once that limit is breached. Extreme weather, well, for Queensland, I'm going to talk about Cyclone Debbie later on, but we've all got to be prepared for extreme weather. It's not just cyclones, it's bushfires, it's flooding, it's wild weather. Security incidents, so again, this is something for you to take back, but have you considered people stealing your explosives, or stealing cyanide, stealing chemicals? Could that be an incident? Could your explosive truck roll over on the way to site? Could the fire brigade ring you and say, Richard, we've had an explosive truck roll over, how do we deal with this? We haven't dealt with an explosives issue before. Now that may or may not happen. You're thinking about in the regional areas, you're not going to have the sort of hazmat officers that you'd have in the city areas that might be all over how to deal with it. Off-site and aviation incidents. So who has flights to get into their site? Anyone? Couple? Did anyone use choppers for exploration or for moving gear around? No? Well, if you did have that, we did have at a few of our sites aviation incidents. So you again could be the first available resource if a plane goes down or a chopper goes down. So you guys know what to do about that. There's some different aspects to dealing with aviation fire than there is to dealing with a loader fire, for example. And the off-site incident, again, that links to the next one around contract partners. So what if your fuel provider, who's bringing diesel to site, rolls over and spills all the fuel into the river or down the side of the road? Does that become a potential reputational issue for your mine or your company? Absolutely. Could you help? Absolutely. Because again, you might be the first available. So if I look at some of our contract partner plans in Evolution, some of them actually refer to contacting our nearest site if they're near site to get help, because that's potentially the quickest emergency response available. And yeah, external parties. So what that one's talking about is, so in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, it's quite a regular occurrence for people to come and chain themselves to pieces of equipment, chain themselves to fences. Now, I know for a fact some of the ERT teams have to help police rescue to cut them free, and that's a fairly hostile environment. We're not talking about people that want your help. They want to be there. So does your plan call for that? People coming and doing a sit-in, for example, on your mine site. What's the ERT response to that? What does your emergency plan say you're going to do? And yeah, there'll be police involvement, but the people that will be cutting the chains off will be the ERT team, I'd suspect. So think about whether your plans cover all the different scenarios, because if you really read into what the legislation wants you to do, it's expecting you to cover all potential outcomes, not just the easy ones. Next one, please, Al. So a couple of quick case studies for you. So these are, so disclosure-wise, these are incidents I've been involved with, and happy to talk freely about them. I won't get into the company names, but let's have a bit of a chat about this one. So this is an underground fire. This is about 10 years ago. What happened, and I'll walk over here so you can see. This is the main level here, and there's a crusher chamber there. So what happened was basically a rubber strap came off a pump that got caught in a drive that caught on fire. In the process of catching on fire, it burnt through a grease line, which started pumping grease onto the fire. This created an obscene amount of smoke in a base, what you call a base level. There's 100 odd people underground at the time. 63 of them were in that base level. And what was really good about this is the person that raised the alarm was well trained. So they've given very, very clear, specific information about where the incident was, information on ventilation, information on smoke, which allowed the mine rescue team responding to work out the strategy to get in there. So in this case, the team was deployed very, very quickly because the information was very solid. So sometimes you'd have a call where there's a fire underground. Okay, what level? Oh, this level. How's the ventilation holding up? Is it going in the normal direction, or has it reversed? Is something different? People don't always know. This particular guy knew exactly what to say, so that was a good training issue. So everyone was sent to their fresh air bases. There's a mutual aid activated. So this particular site is in Western New South Wales. There was about 20 people on ERT, and there was 5 of them on site at the time of the incident. So the standard process there was activate mutual aid as soon as an incident occurs. So they're about an hour away. The team was put down the shaft, so it's a shaft access mine, and that's a fresh air intake, so you're going down in fresh air the whole time. When you get to the base level, you're still in fresh air, and you can basically, this is almost a textbook exercise, because you could basically walk up to the cuddy where the chamber was in fresh air, then don. So you didn't have to don at the plat before you went underground. Once the fire was put out, the biggest issue was smoke management. So it took about 10 minutes to put the fire out once the team got deployed, but the smoke stayed in the mine for about 2 hours. And the primary issue about that was people removing batters. So we all know about underground batter walls where people go, oh, it's a bit hot here, we're going to pull out a plank and make it a bit cooler. Because that had happened, that actually changed where the smoke ended up. So what ended up happening was the smoke was pushing up at the primary exhaust, which is what it's supposed to do, but then we had it creeping out and down the drives. Because basically the fresh air goes down the decline, which is pretty normal, and then back out a return air rise. So what ended up happening was all this smoke was running into different parts of the mine. The other thing that was disappointing, but again, it's good learning, was what people do when they're in fresh air bases. So if you think about 2 hours in a fresh air base, that's a fairly long time, and people were told to hold while that work was going on. One of the fresh air bases we went to, we were still under air, and all the guys are outside the fresh air base having a cigarette. So we've gone and said, what are you guys doing? Like the mine hasn't been cleared yet and the gas detectors are going crazy. They said, no, we can see the smoke. It's all running straight down the decline. Because they were in a cuddy, so they were thinking they were safe, but weren't conscious about the gas in the air. So everyone's clambered back in. Now, the gas levels weren't dangerous at that point, but it was still alarming. So it was a good educational piece there around, hey, when you got sent to a fresh air base, you stay there. And this is why. So it's helping people understand that. The why is really important. So there's a few training things to come out of that, but I suppose I share that because there's a whole bunch of risk management that happened in the space of about 10 minutes while a team was being deployed. So when you think about when you go and do a crane lift in the mine, for example, you might take an hour to prepare a JSA. We're talking about putting men and women underground in a hurry and understanding risk in real time. And some of these dynamic risk assessments, which are all across, operate a little bit differently to how you would do a crane lift. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that as we go, but I wanted to just share with you some of the things we learnt from that. One of the other things that I found really interesting, which, you know, if you think about burn time, that fire probably burnt for maybe 20 minutes before we got water on it, and we already had rocks starting to burst around it. So you've probably heard about that in some of your underground training for the underground miners, where you get enough heat onto rock, it'll actually start to burst, and that was starting to occur after 20 minutes. So you can imagine a loader fire. You know, most of us would know if there's a loader fire underground, everyone's out, let it burn. You can think about all the damage you're going to have to your rock and to your ground support after an hour or two of burn time. Any questions on that before I move on?
Yeah, sorry, you mentioned it was a 5-man group. That was on site?
Yes, it was. Yep.
And usually average an hour.
Yep.
Was there any other ERT members in camp, or was it a camp?
No, not a camp. No. So 5 guys are deployed. Page is activated to bring everyone on, and then the mutual aid was activated. So the site protocols allowed for a team of 4 to be deployed. Yeah. So 5's okay. Next one now.
Was that a coal mine?
Say again?
Was that a coal mine?
No. Different story for a coal mine. That's a gold mine.
I was going to say.
Yeah. You'd be a bit cautious to put a team underground if it's coal.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, how'd you put fire on?
Yeah. Lots of water. So here's an unusual one. So I talked about product stewardship before. This is one of the overseas incidents I got involved with. So this was a mineral concentrate, so zinc concentrate. It was in the hull of a ship. It created a self-heating environment. So this is pretty common. If you don't get the moisture content right on a mineral concentrate, it can self-heat, particularly a zinc concentrate. So what was going on was when the stevedores opened the hoods over in Japan, 3 of them went down. So overcome by fumes. So they didn't know this was going on. This is a pretty standard issue. So when you actually open the lid of a bulk marine vessel, you are to check it with a gas detector. There's actually a little, you can see this fella here, he's actually putting a probe down. There are actually spots to put a probe in to check the gas before you open. That didn't happen, and these guys are overcome with fumes. So interestingly, they called the number on the SDS, which happened to go, this is why I asked before, went back to the company I work for and said, hey, we've got an issue with your concentrate. What do we do? It's on fire in the hull of a ship. So think about your concentrates or your products for a minute. Where's that number go? So there'll be a number on there. If it says you're going to call Chem Alert, you'll probably find they'll call you and say, so what do I do about this? So in this circumstance, we got a phone call about it. It quickly made its way through the organisation, and 4 hours later, there's 2 of us flying over to Japan to give them a hand with this this mineral concentrate. So let me paint a picture for you. So we've arrived over there maybe 15 hours later, and we've sat down and met with the owners of the concentrate. So they've purchased it. That's their concentrate now. And they've said, we need our concentrate out of that ship. There's a couple of things I want you to work on. I said, okay, what is that? You can't kill anyone. I said, okay, fair enough. We don't plan to. You can't damage our concentrate in any way. Okay, no problem. And the union has to sign off on whatever you're going to do. Okay, we can live with that. So we've rolled down to have a look, because over the phone initially we said, just fill the hole with water. That's the easiest way to deal with self-heating concentrate. And they said, no, we can't do that because it'll wreck the concentrate, which is true. You could suck it out and put it through a filter press, but yeah, it will ultimately damage the concentrate. So we've gone down and met with the local, what we'll call hazmat team. I'm using that term loosely. They were a Coast Guard unit whose primary job was to hunt pirates off the coast, and these are the first response from the Coast Guard. So they've come in, they've done some gas testing and said, yeah, this is a problem. Basically, I think we should just send the ship out of Japan. That was their opening argument. And we had about 12 stakeholders to deal with. So just, again, painting a picture. So they had some people from the Japan government there. We had the Coast Guard, we had the fire service, we had the stevedores, we had the union, had the insurance company, Lloyd's of London. We also had the boat owner was there as well, because if you think about a fire inside a ship, and that ship's probably worth 50 million bucks, they want it dealt with pretty quickly. So anyway, what the long and short of this is, we've got a whole bunch of risks there just in the stakeholder management piece. The other thing that actually became a real challenge was we could just open it and let the gas vent to the atmosphere, but the problem was the levels of the gas. So there was 1,000 ppm of sulfur dioxide. So you think, okay, what's 1,000 ppm? So it'll kill you at 100. It'll do a fair bit of damage to you at 50. So 1,000 ppm to the atmosphere, that's a bit of an issue. The other challenge we had was the EPA came and met with us and said, when you release, you have to keep it under 1 ppm. So, okay, so now we've got some major issues here. So, I suppose why I share this with you is this is a little bit unusual, and this is something where we had 2 mine rescue people that ended up running this incident. So we went over there to help and say, give them some technical support if you like, but they've ended up saying, no, you're going to tell us the plan, you're going to tell us how to do it, write an execution plan and make it happen. Took 7 days to get that gas out of there. Long and short of it was, we took it out of the harbour, we vented slowly, and we had this whole, I suppose, ventilation plan where we were pumping inert gas in to help push the nasty gases out. I did just want to flood it with water, because that would have solved the problem in about 10 minutes, but that wasn't going to work. We managed to do that without hurting anyone, and we managed to make that concentrate saleable at the end of the day. So they came back into Japan, it got unloaded, and we're all very happy. But I share this with you because if you think about it for your own guys, so you've got a concentrate you might make, you get the call, Josh, you might get the call and say, hey, our concentrate's a problem in China, how do we deal with it? You might be the man that has to explain that. I'd recommend you take a metallurgist, because that's who we took with us, and they were excellent. But in terms of execution, you've got to think about all the different things that can go wrong. And this is a really good example of how the ERT teams can add value outside the box. So it's not just about cutting people out of cars and putting fires out. You'll notice there's another flag up there, so Chinese. So the company that I was working for at the time, MMG, they're owned by a Chinese company, so they also wanted briefings as well, because there's this concentrate's floating all around Asia, going to different smelters. So how do we deal with that? We end up doing exactly the same thing. Yeah, the next slide, mate. 5 minutes. This is just a picture of the port, so that's in Japan. Next one. It's a picture of the port over in China as well. So this ended up happening twice. So we got back from Japan and there was another issue in China, went over to China and did exactly the same thing. Quite interesting. Next one, mate. Cyclone Debbie. So we're all familiar with this one. So this is a picture of Mount Carlton Mine. And this was what the cyclone track, I think it was about a day before it actually came through. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a rundown on how we dealt with it. Next one, mate. So the challenge for us as an organisation was we didn't want people being put at risk, so we chose to evacuate the site completely. So we did that about 2 days before the cyclone hit, based on the information from the bombs suggesting that it was going to be a direct hit on site. So there's an immediate risk to people, our assets, and obviously our operations. So when I say that we're evacuating people, it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. There's obviously a fair bit that goes on with that. We've got to tell the market about that. We've got to tell shareholders about that. We've got to explain the thinking that went into, is there any other way of maintaining operations or maintaining a presence on site? There wasn't in this case. The other piece that was interesting was the stakeholders involved. So we had to spend a lot of time explaining this to the environmental regulator, the mines regulator around why we were doing it and why this is the smartest play in terms of pulling people off site, and then there's no one there to monitor things like dams for when they fill up with water or damage that may occur. So we evacuated everyone. We put in place our business continuity plan, which is where you set up another office and we still have contact with our employees. The focus of our employees was looking after their own homes, because we're talking about a cyclone that's impacting hundreds of kilometres of the coastline. But then we had to think about, so how do we firstly restart operations? When do we know it's safe to go through? How will we know? So we had some indicators we were using from BOM. And then we thought, so what are we expecting to occur? So the type of winds that were being talked about were Cat 4 to Cat 5, so we decided let's put a mine rescue team up in Cairns so they can come in and be our damage team. So a few of the guys in the room were part of that team, and they were up to Cairns. Ultimately we got lucky and it didn't hit our site. Interestingly got more rain at Mount Rawdon, which is 100 odd kilometres inland, than we did at Mount Carlton. But in terms of restarting operations, we put some people in with choppers. They did a damage assessment. It was pretty low in terms of what the damage looked like. So then we decided maybe that rescue team can go and help the community. And they got their chainsaws and all their toys and headed into Bowen, went down to Proserpine, went down to Ellie Beach and really added a fair bit of value. In some cases, we're the first emergency services on the ground, which I'm pretty proud of. Interestingly, the main issue for us was managing water in evolution, so it wasn't about fixing buildings or keeping people safe. Once we removed the issue of having people on site, it's around having too much water in dams, having too much water flowing over roads at Mount Rawdon, for an example. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an insight into all the thinking that goes in there. So it's all these, I think we probably had about 10 different meetings before making the call to evacuate the site, and then there would have been 2 to 3 meetings a day, ongoing briefings to the whole company around how we're managing that particular incident. And right at the middle was our ERT teams. So ERT teams were playing a role all the way through, and they did a fantastic job. Next one in. So emergency management protocol. So I set out a couple of questions for you. So I'll try and rip through these. So they got the rev up from Al a minute ago. So is your site plan documented? So I'm sure you've all got emergency management plans, but how detailed are they? Do they have all the information you need to be able to pick it up and say, okay, now I know what I need to do? Or is there a little bit of, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know, you know what I mean, don't you, Josh? Go and put that fire out. How detailed is it? Does it cover everything that needs to cover? Is it linked to your corporate crisis management plan? So it's one thing to have an emergency management plan at a site level, but how does that escalate up? Because most of these incidents will become a crisis of some description for an organisation. And who's your first response? So we talked a little bit about it earlier around who's there for that first hour. Is it members of the mining team, the processing team, and what skills have they got to be able to look after you? How do you maintain control as the incident escalates? So if you look at a Beaconsfield, for example, so Beaconsfield was a few years ago now, but they activated mutual aid, but we had people there from all over Australia, and they really didn't have control of that in terms of the day-to-day. Now, while the site did a fantastic job, and they'll talk about that, the agencies start to take over. And that's okay, that's their job, but you've got to work out how you're going to work with the agency, which comes back to my earlier point around, have they been to your site? Do they understand the context? Have you brought them in on the plan? Because you'll find that's all that learning happening on the run and it starts to become heated. But if you've already got existing pre-incident plans and people know each other, you'll find that's a little bit more easy. This is a question I like to ask sites. So how long do you think you can operate independently before you need help? I would suggest to you that most sites would sort of peak out at about 24 hours. Happy to be proved wrong there, before you need someone else to come in and help. We have people coming in from camp, people coming in from town, or people coming from a nearby mine. How long can you run an incident management team before you need help? So if you look at Beaconsfield, they ran for about 7 days before they needed additional help, but they had help prior to that. So that's pretty impressive. I would suggest to you we'd probably need help pretty quickly from other sites within our company, and we run 7 mines. Do you have mutual aid agreements, and are they documented? So I can't stress this enough. So if you're expecting for the mine up the road to come and give you a hand, you've got to have a protocol in place for how that's going to work. Things that sort of hold up mutual aid, insurance. That's normally the main issue. So who's going to deal with the insurance if someone gets hurt or something goes wrong? And does everyone understand what they need to do? How far away is your help? So it's one thing to have a mutual aid agreement, but if you're in the middle of South Australian desert and your nearest help is Roxby Downs and it's 400 kilometres away, now we're saying that's probably 5 hours before I get help. Or do they have a chopper? Can they chopper help into it? How far away are your state agencies and can they actually help? What will you do when they turn up? You've got a pumper at the gate saying, I understand you've got an underground fire, how can we help? That might be a good outcome, or the worst outcome might be we're here and we're taking over. So how are you going to deal with that? And what can they do to actually help you? So think about it as an opportunity. So if the fire and emergency agencies turn up and say, we're here to help, ask them for help. They've got USAR capability, use that. They've got hazmat capability, use that. They've got access to Emergency Management Australia, who've got access to the Defence Force. So you've got to think about all the different things that you can use to get a resolution to your outcome. What about specialist help? So if you need specialist help, say you're in a coal mine, you need a gag unit, how are you going to get the gag unit there? So that's gigantic, that thing, for those that haven't seen the gag unit. It fits on the back of a semi-trailer. You can go on a very large plane, but where are you going to land it? Where's the nearest airport? So we've all got airstrips, but can you land a Hercules there? Logistics and crew welfare, so I talked a little bit about that. So does your emergency plan deal with getting gear in and out? So if we're relying on a mutual aid arrangement and they're going to fly in, where are they going to land? Where's that plane going to come from? Is there approvals you need for the plane? Who's going to pay for the plane? Where's the plane going to pick them up from? So if I'm relying on Charters Towers guys to come and help me at Krakow, and I'm going to fly them out, so I've got an arrangement in place where I can fly out of Charters Towers and fly into Theodore, as an example. Is that already documented? And who would do that flying? Who can I mobilise quickly to do that? What about the community? Where do they fit in? They're going to want information. They'll know about it. So the next one says it all. Social media. So who saw on Facebook the process plant fire in WA a few weeks ago? Everyone would have seen that, wouldn't they? So that was on social media within an hour. And there was video and vision of that incident within an hour. So they actually beat Rio Tinto to the punch in terms of getting it out there. So Rio were pretty quick to get something out, but that was about 2 hours. So whatever happens will be on social media very quickly. So assume that, and there's nothing you can do about it, except to encourage people not to do it. What are you going to do if the media rocks up at your gate? Have you got a plan? Is that in your emergency plan? You can't say talk to corporate in Sydney or talk to corporate in Brisbane. How do we deal with it? Special interest group, ASX, so do we have to tell the ASX about it if you're an Australian listed company? You will. So there have to be some type of press release. Are there standard press releases in your emergency plan or your crisis plan? The regulators got to know, so my recommendation to you would be call out the ERT and then call the mines inspector. Do not delay in telling them what's going on. A couple of interesting ones, so government agencies, so they can help you. They'll also hinder you if you don't help them. So what I mean by that is, do you have anyone on a 457 visa at your site? And you think, that's a weird one, so I'm always talking about that. Because the consulate from whatever country they're from will need a briefing on what's going on with that person, and they'll be asking for it straight up. So the state government will help you with that, because then they'll talk to the federal government. Interestingly, the guys in New South Wales and the regulators are doing a lot of work on this, and they're looking at a whole of government approach to a major mining incident. There's some really good work going on here to make your life easier. It's not meant to make your life hard. If you think about trying to get word to next of kin, say that person's family is in America, for example, or over in the UK, they've got to be notified before anything goes out in the media. So that's got to happen in a fairly expeditious way. So the government will help you with that. Next one. So I'm not going to read through all this, but I suppose I'll give you a bit of a summary. So this is support and resources. There is heaps of support and resources out there. So when we say earlier you're on your own when the incident immediately happens, there's people you can call to help. So in Queensland, you've got the Queensland Mine Rescue Service that can help. You've got SIMTARs. So SIMTARs can help you with gas support. They can help you with some of the scientific side. You've got the gag unit if you're a coal mine, you've got a fire underground. You've got the regulator now who's really pushing mutual aid, wants everyone to have mutual aid agreements. They're also pushing now the level 1 exercise in metalliferous. Coal have been doing it forever, and they're doing it really well. So this is a case of metalliferous starting to pick up some of the coal work. One area where we do need to do a bit more work is on working in with the mine disaster, the local disaster committees, getting mines involved with those. So that happens a little bit, but it'd be good for that to be across the board. But the really good news is the DNRM are getting really focused on this now. So similar sort of focus to what we're seeing in New South Wales. New South Wales, I talked a little bit about that. So that there's a New South Wales Mine Rescue Service, and they're called up in our plan, as are the Queensland Mine Rescue Service. So if something goes wrong, these are people we'll call for help. Just like SIMTARs have got coal services there, and they're exceptional. They do a really good job with the gas side, and they can put people on site very quickly. Interestingly, in Victoria, they've actually got a state mine rescue agency. So this is part of the CFA, so Oscar 1. So those that go to Victorian Mine Rescue Comps, they'll know about them. They're funded by the government. They are volunteers and tend to be mine workers, but there is an agency you can call who will roll with trucks and breathing apparatus to help you. And interestingly, Emergency Management Victoria are now taking a leadership role in mine rescue. So you can't just have a site mine rescue plan. EMV will want to sign that off, and they'll want to integrate that into the local emergency management plan, which I think is fantastic. South Australia are lagging behind a little bit, but they're a bit smaller. So they've got mutual aid agreements. They're starting to get more coordinated, which is fantastic. And interestingly, there is a mine rescue unit that the SES run in Lightning Ridge, and they will respond if called. Just in South Australia, they're not going to come to cracker, as an example. Western Australia, so interestingly, Western Australia have been at this a long, long time. They've set a lot of the standards for us in the eastern states, particularly around distance to fresh air bases and rules and protocols. They've just developed a new code of practice around emergency preparedness, which is quite good. And I know that the local DNRM up here has got a copy of that, and we're looking at that, whether that applies to Queensland. They're going to do their own here. Tasmania, so Tasmania, they're doing some really, really good stuff, and I want to share this with you because I really like what they're trying to do down there. So every year they have an annual captain and coordinator briefing. So all the captains and all the coordinators from all the mine rescue teams in Tassie, which isn't that many, but if you think about us, there's probably 20 in metalliferous and there's a lot more in coal. You could do that. You could get together and talk about, things that have happened over the years, lessons learned, training changes, and trying to get a little bit more coordinated, particularly around mutual aids. So they're doing a really good job of that. Lots of competitions, which was really our only opportunity to practice and train. Questions? Excellent. So that's just a photo from the Victorian Mine Rescue Conference. One of my favourite ones because you've got 5 different agencies working together on the one casualty, and that's what it's about. We're all going to work together. We can't be about I'm going to do my bit and you do your bit. Let's do our bit and make it work. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate it.